Okay, working on fingerspellen. Woo.
Alright, so today what we're going to try and do is we're going to try and break down our U.S. Constitution and our government in 2 review sessions. If we could possibly cram it all into 10 minutes or less. Session 1 here, we're going to take a look at basically the 3 branches of government. The legislative branch, the executive branch, and the judicial branch. Session 2 will take a little bit of a closer look at the Bill of Rights and the 7 principles found in the United States Constitution. So let's start it off with Article 1 of the Constitution, the legislative branch. I want you to think way back to our previous sessions when we talked about the Great Compromise, right? Think way back to the Great Compromise. Alright, got it? So that compromise, again, remember, that was the compromise between the Virginia plan and the large state plan and the New Jersey plan, or the small state plan. Well, what did they do with the Great Compromise? But, boom, they did them both, right? And that's what has set up our legislative branch, or our Congress in the United States today. Remember the fancy word that we have for this? Starts with the letter B, talking about a 2-house legislature? Bicameral legislature. That's right, bicameral. Don't forget that one. Put it down into your old noggin up there. Right, so the bicameral legislature. Let's take a look at the large state plan first. Also known now today as the House of Representatives, right? Where the bigger you are in population, the more people you have in your state, the more votes that you have. The more representatives that you have. Remember, to be in the House of Representatives, you need to be 25 years old, a U.S. citizen, and you need to have lived in the state that you are representing. And so that's kind of the first kind of big deal, how you get into the House of Representatives. So me, I could technically run. So maybe I could challenge Michelle Bachmann and give up this whole teaching gig and go be a congressman. Not going to happen. I'd much rather be teaching than off in Washington, D.C. with all those folks. Ooh, it's a wild and crazy place. So the House of Representatives, right? There are how many members total? 435, right? So 435 total. California being the largest with, I want to say, 52. And then there are a bunch of states like North Dakota, South Dakota, Hawaii, Rhode Island, teeny tiny states that only have 1 representative for the whole state. Minnesota, we have 8 representatives, right? 8 districts that are kind of split out around throughout the state. And remember, you guys live in district number 6, and Michelle Bachmann is your representative. So the House of Representatives, that's kind of the first house, or the first side of our legislation that helps to make our laws. You know, they are responsible for making our laws. Then on the other side, we have the small state plan, right? We have the small state plan here, or the New Jersey plan, and the idea here is that each state has equal representation. So how many senators, right, because the small state plan creates the United States Senate, how many senators does each state have? Dos, right? We have 2 senators in each state for a grand total of 100 senators in the entire Congress. In Minnesota, our 2 senators are Amy Klobuchar and Al Franken, right? So they are our senators for the state of Minnesota. The Senate, you have to be 30 years old to run for the Senate, so I've got a few years yet, so maybe I'll consider running in the Senate and get my act together a little bit, right? You got to be 30 years old to be in the Senate. You stay in the Senate for 6 years once you are elected. Longer than the president at 4 years, longer than the House, which is 2 years. You stay in the Senate for 6 years, you have to be 30 years old, U.S. citizen, and live in the state that you represent. Now the Senate, they're a little bit more formal, right? They've got kind of some goofier rules. Anytime that the president wants to confirm or wants to appoint judges to the Supreme Court or wants to sign treaties, right? Maybe the president says, I would like to sign a treaty with Satan, Lord of Darkness. We are best friends forever. Not that this current president or any president would ever do that, but if we had a president that wanted to do that, before the United States could agree to it, the Senate would have to approve that. And of course, the Senate would be like, no way, Jose, we are not going to sign a pact with the Lord of Darkness, Satan. Not happening. So the Senate has a lot of things that they can do like that. And also remember, the Senate can also filibuster. Right? Remember when I read Goldilocks and the 3 Bears in class, and you're like, what the heck is Canton doing? He's reading this book, and we've got all this work to do. That's essentially what a filibuster is. Remember, it basically is a time-wasting thing. Some of you got very frustrated with me. And that's what a filibuster does. It kind of frustrates people. It slows things down. And in the Senate, when it happens, what it basically means is that you have unlimited speech. You can talk forever. You can talk till you're dead, right? Unlimited speech by usually the minority power. The idea is is that, remember, you need to have 51 votes in the Senate to pass anything, to pass a bill into law. But the idea is that 51 votes should not equal 100. It should not equal everyone's opinion. So the idea is that the minority party can speak as long as they want. And the only way that you can stop them is by voting for what is known as cloture, or basically if you get 60 votes. Right now, the Democrats in the Senate have 59 votes, the Republicans have 41. So, can the Democrats stop a Republican filibuster? Nope, not going to happen unless, of course, a Republican would vote to stop it, which probably isn't going to happen. So you can see where a filibuster, it kind of protects the views of the other side. So that kind of basically breaks down our two branches, right? The Virginia plan, or our two sides of the Virginia plan, large state plan, House of Representatives, New Jersey plan, small state plan, United States Senate. 100 senators, 435 representatives. And what is the job of Congress, of the legislative branch? Again, you know this, folks. L, legislate. They make laws. All right, that brings us to Article 2 of the United States Constitution, which sets up our executive branch, or our president of the United States of America, the highest office in the land. A lot of power, a lot of responsibility. Remember, we said that the president basically has 7 different jobs that he will do. He does the jobs of like 7 different people, but it's all combined in one. But before we look at those jobs, let's talk requirements. 35 years old. You need to live in the United States, and it's more than just being a U.S. citizen. You need to be natural born, meaning you need to be born in the United States. You can't be born someplace else and become a citizen. Natural born. So talking about his jobs. Legislative leader, right? He can suggest laws to Congress, but he cannot make laws. He gives the State of the Union speech. Remember, we discussed in class that the President's State of the Union speech focused on jobs and the economy, basically telling Congress, hey, let's make some laws about the economy, get the economy going again. And he also gives a budget to Congress, which, of course, Congress, the legislative branch gets a chance to work with, and then the President can sign it or veto it. That's the President's legislative role. President is also Commander-in-Chief. Right, he decides what the goals are going to be for our nation's military, what the goals are going to be for our nation's army. So decreasing troops in Iraq and increasing troops in Afghanistan. That's part of being the commander-in-chief in the United States military. He is also our foreign policy leader, dealing with other countries, how we deal with countries like Iran and North Korea. He's also our chief diplomat, meaning he kind of settles these disagreements between countries that might be arguing, for example, Israel and Palestine, helping to kind of be the mediator. The president has judicial powers. He gets to pick the judges that will be on the Supreme Court. More on that in a second. The president also has what we refer to as political party leader. He's kind of the leader of his political party. And then lastly, the chief of state, throwing out the first pitch at the baseball games, ceremonies, picnics, barbecues, things like that. So again, legislative leader, commander-in-chief, head of the military, foreign powers, chief diplomat, judicial powers, chief of state, and then what am I forgetting? Political party leader. All right, that's kind of the president in a nutshell. All right, moving on to our third branch, or the judicial branch, Article 3 of the United States Constitution, which sets up the Supreme Court of the United States and a bunch of lower courts. Requirements to be on the Supreme Court? Nothing. No requirements to be on the Supreme Court. So you're probably sitting there going, boy, could the president nominate Lady Gaga to be on the Supreme Court? Yeah, he sure could. And believe me, I love Lady Gaga as much as the next person, but I really hope he does not nominate Lady Gaga to be on the Supreme Court. But if he does, remember the Senate gets to vote. And they would take one look at her and be like, I'm sorry, Ms. Gaga, but you are not allowed to be on the Supreme Court. So there are no requirements, but the Senate confirms those nominations to the Supreme Court. That keeps it so we do have legit people, qualified people who are serving on our Supreme Court. Remember, once you are on the Supreme Court, you are on it for life, right? Unless you do something horrible, like shooting somebody at a 7-Eleven or something like that, you're on the Supreme Court for life unless you choose to retire. So it's a pretty nice job. And of course, the idea behind that is that you don't have to run for re-election. So if people are angry at you, that's okay, right? People can get angry at the Supreme Court, and they don't have to worry about getting fired. Because remember, the Supreme Court, their job is to judge the laws. They are judges. They judge the laws and determine whether or not a law is a good law or a bad law. So if Congress, heaven forbid, should pass a law that says all people with brown hair and green eyes need to pay a tax, and it passes through Congress, the Supreme Court will take a look at that law and be like, That's not fair. That's violating their rights, right? The Supreme Court basically makes sure that everything follows the supreme law of the land, or the United States Constitution. We played a game on that in class. We were able to kind of see how the Supreme Court works. So that's it in a nutshell, folks. Our three branches of government. Legislative branch, which is Congress, the House, and the Senate. Executive branch, which is the President. And the judicial branch, which is the Supreme Court. In our next section, we'll take a look and see how all three of these branches play together, and we'll take a look at the Bill of Rights. See ya!